U.S. President-elect Donald Trump announces more tariffs to be imposed on China, Mexico, and Canada, citing the flow of illegal drugs and migrants. Sources in the U.S. say a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah is close, with the Israeli cabinet expected to vote on Tuesday. North Korea starts removing power lines set up by South Korea that were used for a now-closed joint industrial complex, in another sign of breaking off with the South. It's November 26, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with U.S. President-elect Trump using the leverage as he reaffirms his intentions to impose more tariffs on some of the U.S. trading partners on the first day of his administration. Lee Eun-jin explains in detail.
President-elect Donald Trump has threatened to hit China, Mexico, and Canada with new tariffs on the first day of his presidency. On his social media platform Truth Social, Trump said that as his first of many executive orders on January 20th, he would impose tariffs of 25% on the U.S.'s neighboring countries, Canada and Mexico, until those countries halt the flow of drugs and migrants crossing their borders into the U.S. He also added that he plans to raise existing tariffs by an additional 10% for all goods coming from China, until the Chinese government implements measures to tackle the smuggling of drugs, specifically the synthetic opioid fentanyl. Washington estimates that almost 75,000 Americans were killed by fentanyl last year. But as Trump sets out to detail the implementation of his campaign promises, it's unclear how he'll be able to do so, as many goods coming from the U.S. from Mexico and Canada are exempted from tariffs under the terms of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement that entered into force in 2020. According to U.S. Census Bureau data for September 2024 on goods traded, Mexico is the largest trading partner of the U.S., followed by Canada and China. In 2023, more than 83% of exports from Mexico and 75% from Canada went to the U.S. Lee Eun-jin, Arirang News.
Now eyes are on what Trump's fresh tariffs plan would mean for the future of global trade. Our Lee Soo-jin has more.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's plan to slap massive tariffs has sparked widespread concerns about the ramifications this will have on global trade. Trump on Monday local time announced on his social media platform Truth Social that he will impose tariffs of 25% on all products from Mexico and Canada and raise tariffs on Chinese goods by an additional 10% as one of his first executive orders on January 20 when he takes office. And the tariffs imposed on Canada and Mexico, two of the U.S.'s largest trading partners, signal that South Korea is highly likely to be subject to such tariffs as well.
Tariffs ranging from 10 to 20% more are expected to be imposed. If that is the case, the volume of exports from South Korea to the United States will drop.
During the campaign, Trump repeatedly threatened big tariff hikes as part of his America First agenda, which seeks to bolster domestic industries. But they may raise prices for U.S. consumers as manufacturers relying on imported materials often pass higher production costs onto buyers. And while the impact of tariffs, according to experts, will thus be felt most by U.S. consumers, economies across the world will also see higher costs.
But other countries, because they have to keep U.S. in mind, will have to strengthen their monitoring systems and so on, so it will mean a rise in trade-related costs for everybody, and it will also mean that there might be retaliatory tariffs.
But here's what South Korean companies can do to minimize the impact.
But the best we can do is to first point out how important Korean goods are for the American markets and American consumers. And second, I think we need to bargain hard. We need to show that there will be consequences not only on the Korean markets, but American markets as well.
The expert also said that Trump may be willing to renegotiate tariff rates in January if he is required to comply with existing trade agreement provisions and address evolving trade priorities. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The U.S. president-elect's legal battle over his alleged election interference in 2020 may be coming to a close, given the Justice Department's policy that prohibits the prosecution of a sitting president. Lee Seung-jae explains.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris during November's presidential elections to return to the Oval Office next January. The election victory may not be his only win, as his return to the White House means he's also set to see his legal issues disappear. This as special counsel Jack Smith has filed motions to drop all federal charges against Trump. The president-elect was first indicted in June 2023 on 37 felony counts related to his mishandling of classified White House documents that were found at his Florida residence. Despite a Florida judge dismissing the case, the special counsel's office sought an appeal. Trump was also indicted in August of that year on charges of attempting to reverse the results of the 2020 elections when he lost to President Joe Biden. The 4 felonies include conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of and an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. In a 6-page document submitted to a Washington, D.C. court, Smith included the reason for dropping the charges. He cited the Department of Justice's position that the case should be dismissed before the defendant takes office in accordance with the Constitution. The Department of Justice maintains the policy of not prosecuting a sitting president, viewing such move as interference with presidential duties. In the case of a sitting president, impeachment proceedings would replace indictments if necessary. Reports say Smith and his team will resign once Trump returns to office, but must give a full report on his investigation to the Attorney General before he steps down. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah appears to be imminent, but obstacles are left unresolved ahead of Israel's cabinet vote on the proposed deal. An Sung-jin with the details.
13 months of fighting may finally come to an end. CNN and other sources reported on Monday that a consensus between Israel and Hezbollah is close to end the war in Lebanon. It's also reported that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with Israeli officials on Sunday night, signaled his potential approval for a ceasefire. This comes ahead of a vote by Israel's Security Cabinet, which is reportedly set to take place on Tuesday. The White House also stated that the ceasefire talks were constructive and that it's going in a positive direction, but cautioned that the deal has not yet been finalized.
We believe we're close to an agreement. We believe that we have narrowed the gap significantly, but there are still steps that we need to see taken.
A Lebanese media outlet stated that it expects a formal announcement from the Lebanese government on Tuesday evening. The draft for the deal entails Israeli forces withdrawing entirely from southern Lebanon, while Hezbollah also pulling its heavy weapons from the Litani River, about 25 kilometers north of the Israeli border, to create a buffer zone.
The first is preventing Hezbollah from moving southward beyond the Litani River, and the second, preventing Hezbollah from rebuilding its force and reaffirming in all of Lebanon.
The Lebanese armed forces would also move in to provide security near the border alongside existing UN peacekeeping forces. It also reportedly includes an initial 60-day transition phase where nearby nations, alongside the U.S., ensure that the ceasefire deal is being properly stuck to. However, whether the deal will be finalized remains uncertain. Far-right Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir called the U.S.-backed ceasefire deal a big mistake and said it would be a historic missed opportunity to eradicate Hezbollah. Another unresolved issue is that Israeli officials have demanded the freedom to strike Hezbollah in case the Iran-backed militant group violates an emerging agreement. But Hezbollah's leader has said it wants a complete ceasefire and protection of Lebanon's sovereignty. Though the two sides have come close to reaching an agreement, the ceasefire may fall through with a single mishap or wrongdoing. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, Ukrainian forces confirm a strike using American tactical ballistic missiles, this time targeting an airbase in Russia. Meanwhile, Russia says it has intercepted 8 of the ballistic missiles fired by Ukraine without giving further details. Cha Yun-kyung has the latest.
Ukraine carried out its first airstrike on an airfield in Russia using the U.S. Army tactical missile system, short-range ballistic missiles, on Monday. The Kalino Air Base in the Kursk region, which is about 100 kilometers from the border, was targeted, according to military sources. Ukraine attacked Russian territory using ATACMS last week, but this was the first attack on the airbase. However, defense industry resource The War Zone reported that there was no clear extensive damage at the base according to satellite imagery obtained today. Kursk is a city in western Russia, which Ukraine captured during its August counteroffensive, and where about 11,000 North Korean troops have been deployed to prepare for combat. Ukraine advanced into the Kursk region to force Russia to pull back forces gradually advancing in the east and gain extra leverage in any peace negotiations. But it has lost more than 40% of the territory captured as Russian forces have mounted waves of counter-assaults, a senior Ukrainian military source said. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry announced that its air defense systems intercepted 8 of the missiles. Also, 45 drones were also downed in the past 24 hours, Russian state news agency TASS reported, citing the ministry. The Ukrainian military also struck an oil depot in Russia's western Kaluga region overnight into Monday, according to AFP. Amid the increased fighting between Moscow and Ukraine, Ihor Terikov, the mayor of Kharkiv, said on Telegram that a fire has been raging at the site of the attack where 23 people were injured. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
In Italy, back on Monday, top diplomats of South Korea and Ukraine met for talks on the margins of the G7 foreign ministers meeting. Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol sat down with his Ukrainian counterpart, Andriy Sybiha, to touch upon the presence of North Korean troops on the battlefield in support of Russia's invasion. Sybiha also voiced hopes for a visit by a Ukrainian delegation to Seoul in the near future to further address the military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. Minister Cho, for his part, added hopes for, quote, meaningful talks during the envisioned visit. In yet another show of animosity, North Korea has severed the power lines set up by South Korea for the operation of a former joint industrial site. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has the report.
Another move by North Korea to sever inter-Korean ties. Pyongyang has cut part of the power lines to the South Korea-installed transmission towers that supply electricity to the now-closed Kaesong Industrial Complex. According to the South Korean military, several North Korean soldiers have been detected removing sections of power lines along the Gyeonggi Road since Sunday.
The regime is yet to do anything to the transmission towers. They have piled up the severed high-voltage lines that fell to the ground.
It is speculated that cutting power lines could be part of preparations to get rid of the towers. The transmission towers, the steel pylons, are built at intervals of several hundred meters along the Gyeonggi Line Road, running from just north of the military demarcation line, the area North Korea blew up in mid-October, to the joint industrial park. There are a total of 48 transmission towers from the Munsan substation to the North Korean Peace substation, 33 towers in the south and 15 on the northern side. These transmission facilities, built by the South Korea Electric Power Corporation in 2006, connected the two Koreas and supplied electricity to the Kaesong Industrial Complex. The power supply was temporarily cut off in February 2016, following North Korea's fourth nuclear test in January of that year. Afterwards, with the thawing of inter-Korean relations, the power supply was partially resumed, but only to be completely halted again in June 2020 after North Korea unilaterally blew up the inter-Korean liaison office in Kaesong. Cutting off the power lines and preparing for the possible demolition of these transmission towers is seen as part of the regime's actions to sever inter-Korean connections since its leader Kim Jong-un declared the two Koreas as hostile nations. This follows the removal of streetlights along roads that run alongside the Gyeonggi and Donghae train lines earlier this year, the removal of the railroads in May, and the demolition of roads in October. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korea's efforts to play up its leader Kim Jong-un's image and power were evident earlier this year when the regime hosted its loyalty oath ceremony on his birthday. Now, this is according to the unification ministry here. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
North Korea appears to be continuing to step up efforts to solidify the leadership cult of the regime's leader. South Korea's Ministry of Unification confirmed Tuesday that North Korea held this year's loyalty pledge on January 8th, leader Kim Jong-un's birthday, instead of the usual January 1st. Loyalty pledges, while regionally varied, typically involve residents gathering for a meeting on the party or leader before signing the pledge. The ministry analyzed the shift as part of a deliberate move to elevate Kim's status, marking a break from tradition that occasionally aligned these pledges with the birthdays of Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-il. The ministry noted North Korea's recent removal of Juche-era references from state media, instead opting for the standard Gregorian calendar. The Juche era is a calendar system tied to Kim Il-sung's birth in 1912. The ministry interprets this shift as Kim distancing his leadership from reliance on the legacy of his predecessors, signaling a stronger push for his own cult of personality. Seoul believes this effort may intensify with potential moves such as declaring Kim's birthday a public holiday or expanding the use of Kim's portraits and badges. On the economic front, North Korea's trade with China has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels. From January to September, bilateral trade reached $1.49 billion, or just 76% of the amount recorded in 2019. Despite a gradual reopening of the economy, North Korea's imports and exports remain sluggish, with sectors such as raw materials for production continuing to dominate trade. The ministry also noted that while North Korea may consider additional troop deployments to Russia, it is more likely to rotate existing forces if the war continues. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
South Korea expressed regret to Japan over the attitude Tokyo showed while consulting on a memorial service for Korean victims of wartime forced labor at the Sado mines. According to the Foreign Ministry on Tuesday, a South Korean official relayed its displeasure to the Japanese embassy in Seoul the previous day. The ministry further urged the two countries to closely communicate so that this issue does not escalate into an unnecessary conflict and can be managed as an individual matter. On the same day, while expressing strong regret over the confusion caused by an inaccurate report made by Kyodo News, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi said the government would ask the media to explain the circumstances that led to such a report. Kyodo News initially ran a report that Parliamentary Vice Minister Akiko Ikuina from Japan's Foreign Ministry, who was invited to represent the Japanese government, visited Tokyo's controversial Yasukuni Shrine, a symbol of Japan's past militarism. Tokyo also emphasized the importance of close cooperation between the two nations for mutual benefit, especially under the current strategic environment. In other news, regional wind energy talks are taking place in the city of Incheon for 3 days to promote this particular energy and address potential challenges. Shin Ha-young tells us more.
Amid global efforts to triple renewable energy capacity by the year 2030, the Asia-Pacific region is drawing significant global attention in terms of its wind energy. According to the Global Wind Energy Council, the APAC region is expected to account for over 60% of new wind capacity worldwide between 2024 and 2030. South Korea is seen as a country that can lead APEC's wind energy growth by leveraging its supply chain strengths and advancing industry-friendly policies to meet its 14.3 gigawatts offshore wind goal by 2030.
There's not many places in the world where we can look and see the technical expertise, the industrial capacity that we see in Korea, and really a potential not just to supply the Korean industry, but to supply projects all around the world.
The remarks came during an opening ceremony of the APAC Wind Energy Summit 2024. Following the recent COP29 summit, wind industry leaders and government officials from 13 countries gathered in Incheon, South Korea to discuss challenges in wind energy sector and ways to accelerate its growth.
2024 is a milestone year for wind energy in South Korea, with February 27th designated as Korea Wind Energy Day, and the government announcing a 100 trillion won offshore wind expansion plan.
The key sessions during the summit dealt with investment within the industry as well as offshore wind supply chain issues.
I think the key takeaway for me is that we need to do more as a region to collaborate, to reconcile with the fact that carbon emissions doesn't care about border, and we shouldn't care either. And
project development can take a long time due to lengthy permits and complex regulations, creating uncertainty about investment scale and timing. South Korea is no exception. Legislation to address these issues is under discussion in the National Assembly to drive growth in the wind industry.
The best advice that we can give, in particularly where an environment where as countries we compete for the same resources, and as an industry we compete with other resources again for the key minerals, for the key materials that go into it, that we ensure that we have a barrier that is as attractive as possible, allowing corporates and developers to have a pathway to profitability.
Jens Orfeld, the regional president for RWE Offshore Wind in Asia Pacific, added that despite concerns over a potential slowdown in U.S. renewable deployment ahead of Trump's second term, it could create opportunities for Asia, including South Korea, to strengthen the energy transition. 신하영, Arirang News.
Around 70,000 workers from the railway, subway, and education sectors here plan to go on a partial general strike together on December 5th and 6th. On Tuesday, the Korean Public Service and Transport Workers Union announced that the joint strike will begin with an indefinite walkout on December 5th by the Railway Union. The strike will continue with industrial action by the Subway and Education Workers Union on December 6th. The unions said that the strike is to protect people's lives and safety, ensure basic workers' rights, and eliminate discrimination. They also mentioned that other unions are preparing to join the strike in the future. Seoul's ancient fortresses may be included in UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites. According to the Cultural Heritage Administration on Tuesday, the International Council on Monuments and Sites has acknowledged the fortresses' potential of being recognized as World Heritage Monuments. The fortresses include the Bukhansansong Fortress located behind Gyeongbokgung Palace, the Hanyang City Wall that connects Seoul's 4 main gates, and the Tangchundaesong Fortress.
Autumn-like conditions last week have turned into rain and snow all over the country. Until tonight, 5 to 10 millimeters of more rain is expected in central parts of the country. Rain already turned into snow in some areas from the afternoon. With preliminary warnings for heavy snow in place, up to 20 centimeters is forecast in Gangwon-do province until Thursday. Snowfall of more than 3 to 8 centimeters is expected in the Seoul metropolitan area. Central parts of the country and Jeollabuk-do province are expected to have heavy snow for the first snow of this winter, so preparations are necessary. Tomorrow, Seoul, Daejeon, and Gyeongju will start off at 1 degree Celsius, Chuncheon -1 degree. Highs in Seoul and Chuncheon will move up to only 3 degrees, Gyeongju 9 degrees. On Friday, the morning temperatures in central parts of the country will plunge to around -5 degrees, making it the coldest this month. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.